What's the point of Prime Minister's questions when the Prime Minister rarely gives a straight answer? It's meant to be a moment of accountability, but often it feels more like a political sparring match. Today, we're diving into an intense session where Keir Starmer faced a rattled and fiery exchange over immigration. His past decisions and alleged contradictions were laid bare in what some are calling a brutal takedown. We'll unpack the key moments, exposing the arguments, the truths, and yes, even the lies, to help you make sense of it all. Stay tuned as we watch, react, and break it all down together.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister didn't seem to want to talk about appointing fraudsters to his cabinet. In fact, he seemed to want to talk about immigration. So let's talk about immigration. He has relaunched yet again. Many new targets, 6 milestones, 5 missions. But why was cutting immigration not a priority?
Speaker, I'm glad she now wants to talk about immigration. Last week she said she didn't, and for good reason. Because the previous government presided over record high levels of immigration. The figures just a few weeks ago, nearly 1 million on net migration. That is unprecedented. A one-nation experiment in open borders under the last government. And she was the champion. She stood up and praised the then Tory Home Secretary for listening to her on removing caps on migration visas. So she was applauding it. Now she's furious about what she was campaigning for. We will drive it down. We will drive down lawful migration. We'll drive down illegal migration.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about open borders. He was the one campaigning for free movement. I was in this House asking for a lift on skilled migration. He was there supporting all of the people who should not have been in this country. He wanted us to relax immigration. But as he's so keen to talk about the past, let's look at his record. 4 years ago, the Prime Minister signed a letter demanding that foreign criminals be allowed to stay in Britain. Dozens of Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs repeatedly signed these letters insisting that rapists and murderers be allowed to stay here. One of those criminals, Ernesto Elliott, had 17 convictions, including for knife crime. After his deportation was blocked, Elliott went on to murder someone. He was able to stay here and murder because people like this man campaigned against deporting criminals. Will he apologise for signing these letters?
Mr. Speaker, I'd firstly remind her that when we're in the number now, under their watch, of migrants coming to this country, nearly 1 million, is over 4 times the number when we're in the EU. They lost control of the borders. And the particular example she puts to me is an example of failure under her government to take the necessary measures to keep our country safe.
Mr. Speaker, this is a ludicrous assertion. He is the one who was repeatedly signing letters. He even asked us to pause all deportations. He doesn't want to talk about his past, Mr. Speaker, but that letter is just the tip of the iceberg. There is more. The Prime Minister actually complained that the immigration system was working to deter migrants rather than provide support. He said, and I quote, that he was proud to have served as Jeremy's shadow immigration minister. He boasted that he took the last Labour government to court for cutting benefits for asylum seekers. He said he would never set a target-based approach to immigration. He wants to talk about immigration. Let's talk about his record. We can talk about it all day. I have committed... Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says he wants to talk about immigration. I have committed to a cap on migration. Why won't he?
Mr. Speaker, she talks about my record. For 5 years, I was the chief prosecutor, prosecuting people who went to prison, many of whom were then deported. So while she's talking, I was actually doing the hard yards of convicting those that should be in prison. And she presided over record numbers of asylum seekers in this country, a record number of lawful and irregular migrants. That is 14 years when they lost control of the borders. They set a cap for each of those 14 years. It wasn't hard. It didn't stop people coming, and it got a record number. They should apologise for what they've done with their open borders policy.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer a single...
Do you want to leave? If you've not got the guts to stand up to the comments, you shouldn't be in here. Let me bear up.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer a single question. He never answers questions. He wants to talk about the past. The fact is, we've acknowledged where things went wrong. He will never take responsibility. He will never take responsibility. The fact is, he has scrapped a deterrent that the National Crime Agency has said we need. Since he came into government and scrapped the Rwanda deterrent, small boat arrivals have increased by nearly 20%. His own MPs are complaining about having to house asylum seekers. So can the Prime Minister tell the House how much more his government will spend on hotel accommodation because he scrapped the deterrent?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd invite her to tell us what went wrong under the last government, but it'd take us all afternoon. Mr. Speaker, we are going to smash the gangs that are running this bile trade. We signed a landmark agreement with Germany this week.
Order. Mr. Philp, you've been very loud. I think now we're going to have a little bit of silence from you, Prime Minister.
This week we signed a landmark agreement with Germany. She should be welcoming that, because that will make sure we have the powers to take enforcement action across the continent where it is needed. We've set up the Border Security Command. We've committed £75 million on top of the existing £75 million. We're extending the powers, so they're counter-terrorism-like powers. We've retained 9,400 people who shouldn't be here. A record flight got off. They talk about getting the flights off. They did it for years. They didn't succeed. We got the flights off.
Mr. Speaker, he says he wants to smash the gangs. The only thing he's smashed is his own reputation. The fact is, what he has been agreeing is not going to do anything. The cost of the Iraq agreement is £500,000. That won't even buy a house in his constituency. Many of the things he's taking credit for are our agreements. Let's talk about what he put in his manifesto. The Prime Minister promised to end asylum hotels. He promised, he's the Prime Minister now, he promised, but in Altrincham and Peterborough, his government is expanding the use of asylum hotels because he unilaterally disarmed the deterrent. In fact, Mr. Speaker, a man who arrived by small boat told Sky News he was happy Labour were in power. That man said the Conservatives, and I quote, wanted to deport us, but Labour are making the procedure easier for us.
So, what do you think? Was this a fair takedown, or just another round of political theatre? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below, and let's discuss.